Hi, I'm Mike. Welcome back to the shop, also known as West National Brewing. So today I'm going to take you through a brew day and the process that I use to make beer out of grain. So I'm just learning how to do all this, and I've made a couple of batches already and they turned out well. So what I just want to do is show you how I do it. I'm sure that there are things that I'm doing that should be done a little bit better. I'm always willing to learn and get some feedback on how this is done. So I'm going to walk you through the entire brew day. I'm going to try to do this as quickly as possible so that you can see how it works. So I'm going to be using this electric mash and boil system. Before we get started, the first thing I got to do is both clean and sanitize the system to make sure I don't get any nasty results because nobody wants to drink nasty beer. So the first thing I do is I made up 2.5 gallon batches of cleaner. I'm using the PWB 5-star cleaner, and I'm also using Star San as the sanitizer. And I'm going to take each of these, clean them out manually, and then circulate them through the system to make sure I don't have any contaminants in the system. This is circulating the cleaner throughout the system. Taking out as much of the old mash as I can. I think I've got it all out. It's not very easy getting all that out. Alright, now by running all the cleaners through all of the ports, the recirculation system and the draining system, I'm making sure that I'm getting the cleaner everywhere in the system. Okay, so the cleanser is taking out all the big chunks. So next thing to do is take the sanitizer. That will help clean out, sanitize also, more than just cleaning. The cleaner takes out the big chunks, the sanitizer removes any nasties also that you want to get rid of. Gotta be plugged in first. Alright, one more time. There we go. Okay, so now we have a clean and sanitized electric brew kettle. Next thing I do is add in the appropriate amount of water and get it to temperature. So I've got to get it up to between 160 and 170 degrees Fahrenheit in order to do the mash. So what I'll end up doing, what I'm going to do is take the kettle in and go fill it from our tap water. And the tap water in our area is, we're on a well, and we are using water coming directly from a limestone aquifer. So it's pretty good stuff. There may be a couple of elements in it, like iron or possibly, but no other chemicals, no conditioners or anything like that. So it's pretty good water. It tastes great coming right out of the tap. So I'm going to go fill this up. I'm going to put 3.5 gallons of water into the kettle, and that's what I'll use to do the mash. So now I've got the 3.5 gallons of strike water inside the electric kettle. I put hot water in just so I don't have to heat it up as much as all the way. So I'm using what I already have in my water tank. So I'm going to set this so that it's at 170 degrees, and we'll bring it up to temperature. It'll probably take about half hour to do that. Yep, current temperature coming out of my tap is 113 degrees. So we're going to wait, and I will start cleaning and sanitizing some of the other equipment that I'm going to be using today. I'm going to reuse the sanitizer and the cleaner that I already used to clean the kettle. So I'm just going to start going through that process, and there's no need for you to sit around and wait for that. Today we're going to be making a brown ale, and I'm going to be using some dry yeast from Safe Ale, Fermentis, and we'll be using 2 different types of hops. We're going to be using Cascade hops as the base, and the UK Kent Golding as the finishing hops that we'll put into this brew. So once we're done, we're going to bottle this beer later. Now that'll be on a different episode. So I've got the strike water heated up, and we're going to use this for the mash. And the strike water we're going to use is going to be set at a temperature of 151 degrees. To allow for that to stay at about 151, 152 degrees, what I'm going to end up doing is bringing this up just a little bit higher. There's a little bit of a cycle on this electric kettle. So I'm going to set it at 155 degrees, and that will go up and down. It'll recirculate. It gives about a 5-degree zone in which the mash will be set, and we'll mash for about 45 minutes, and then I'm going to raise the temperature up at the end of the mash up to about 170 degrees, and we'll let that set for about 10 minutes. Okay, we've got the right temperature now, so what I'm going to start doing is slowly adding the grain into the kettle. I'm also going to be using the cleaned and sanitized spoon to stir it in, and then we'll set the pump so it's just recirculating it slowly and keeping the water flowing and pulling down through. The intent here is basically just to release the sugars out of the grain, and those sugars will then be fermented later on. So that's the goal here. When we're done, we'll remove the grain and reuse that for some dog treats or flour or making bread. So this is what I'm going to do now. I'm just going to slowly add the grain into the strike water. And I'm slowly adding this in just so that I don't get any dry clumps. I want to make sure that all the grain is wetted and that the water is flowing around it. Again, we don't want to have any sort of dry clumps or any part where the strike water is not getting to the grain. Okay, the pump is also running, and another good reason for the pump running is it circulates the water, the strike water throughout the grains, and it helps to make sure that you have a nice even distribution of temperature throughout the kettle, throughout the mash kettle. That way we're making sure we're extracting as much sugar as possible out of the grain during this part of the process. One thing you got to be careful of is don't run the pump too fast because with all the grain in here, the water doesn't go through the sieve very quickly, and you want to make sure you don't run the heating element dry. It can burn it out. So when I'm running the pump, I'm watching down the side to make sure that I've got good coverage over the heating element. And I've got to slow this down just a little bit. Okay, so we've got about 15 minutes left of the mashing process at the 150 to 155 degrees. I've got the sparge water now heating on a stove. I've got about 2.5 gallons, 3 gallons of that coming. And so in about 10 minutes, I'm going to start raising the temperature of the mash up to 170 degrees, and we'll let that sit for about 10 minutes. And once that's done, then we'll start draining the mash. Okay, the wort has now been heated for 60 minutes at the 150 to 155 degree temperature range. We've raised the temperature now of the mash and the wort up to 170 to 173 degrees. So that's going to sit for another 10 minutes, and then we will begin the sparging. I've got the water heated up in the sparge pail or kettle. I've got that heated up at this point to 170 degrees, and when this is done, we'll start that process. Okay, so I'm ready to sparge. We've got the hot water. This is at 170 degrees, so this is ready to go. I've got enough of the water from the original mash drained out, so I'm going to do this in a couple of steps. So I'll do about half of it, half of my water here. Half of my sparge water has now been added, and I'll let that drain down. I'm going to keep an eye on how much water is in it'll now be the boil kettle. See how much is in there. I need to get it to about 5.5 gallons. So as I'm doing the sparging, I'm also stirring. The idea is to get the sparge water going through all the grains, and again, extracting as much of the sugars as possible. But you need to mix it, otherwise the water is just going to sit on the top of the grain. So the grain gets pretty solid as all the original strike water is drained out, or now the wort is drained out. So you can hear it as I'm stirring, it's coming out. Okay, and the next half. At this point, I can turn the temperature up on the boil kettle to the boiling range. So I'm going to set it at 215 to start with, and then I'm going to make sure it stays above boiling. Okay, we got the wort up to the boil temperature now. Now it's time to add in, so we got a 60-minute boil. Now we add in the first of the 2 hops, and this is the Cascade hops. And I'm going to add 1 ounce of the Cascade hops here at the 60-minute mark in the boil. The next set of hops go in at 10 minutes left, so 50 minutes into the boil. Now, be very careful when you put hops in. If you put it on all at once, it's going to boil over and make one heck of a mess. So you do it very slowly, small amounts at a time. Yeah, see, it's almost boiling over. So I'm going to give it a few seconds to rest. I probably put about 1/3 of the hops in. Okay, now it's boiling down. Do a little bit more. Boy, that smells good. Good there. All right, good. So that's in. And that's the beginning of the boil, so it's about noon, so at 12:50 I'll put in the next one. Alright, time to add the Kent Goldings hops. Again, the same process. I don't want to put too much in at once. That was a little bit easier. Okay, since I'm about 10 minutes to the end of the boil, the next thing I'm going to do is put the chiller in, which will help me get the temperature down quickly so that I can pitch the yeast. This chiller has been put through the cleaner and the sanitizer. I don't really need to sanitize it, but I like doing that. As long as you go through the boil process, it will sanitize by it naturally. But it's been cleaned and sanitized. So just to add a little bit extra insurance, I will put it in to the boil. The ends are outside the pot, so that's good. Okay, the boil is done. I've got the cooling lines hooked up. I've got a drain out here that goes down further into my yard. I got the hose in. So now all I'm going to do is continue until the temperature reaches from 206, now that it's cooled down a little bit, down to 70. And 70 is the temperature hopefully I can get to. And I'm going to see how long this takes. I think it's usually about 30 to 40 minutes to go from the 206 or the boil temperature down to about 70 degrees. This has been plugged in only for about 5 or 6 minutes, and it's already down 40 degrees. So, but it's the last 20 degrees that takes the longest because there's not as much of a temperature difference. So, we'll see. I'll tell you how long the whole process takes. Okay, this is what the business end of the cooling process looks like. There's the hose, and there's the drain. So it's looks like a pretty decent flow rate. I tried it a little bit slower, and it didn't cool as fast, so that's about the right amount right there. I don't need to go any faster than that. Well, we're down from about 212 to so about 70 degrees in about 10 minutes. Target temperature is 70, so this is going pretty well. Okay, it's been about 50 minutes and we're down to 88 degrees, so we're 87 degrees, great. So we're probably in the safe temperature zone. Once I get things transferred into the fermentation bucket, we'll probably get it down another 3 or 4 degrees. So it's probably safe pitching temperature for the yeast. So we're ready to move on. Okay, now we transfer the beer, the unfermented beer, into the bottle or the fermentation bucket. This bucket and the airlock that goes with it and the cover have all been cleaned and sanitized. So these are ready to have the beer put in. If you don't sanitize it, you could have some microbes or something that will destroy the beer. So you want to make sure that you go through both the cleaning process and the sanitization process. So now all I'm going to do is fill the bucket, and I'm going to try to do it without introducing a lot of air into the process. So I'm going to have the spigot off of here touching the side of the bucket and then just flowing the beer into the fermentation bucket. So I don't want it dropping into the bucket. I just want it going down the side of the bucket, and so as like this. Okay, I've got about half of the bucket full at this point, and now what I'm going to do is take the dry yeast, and I'm going to put the dry yeast into the bucket. That way it'll get a little bit of mixture of the yeast into the beer. So take the yeast and put it into the bucket. Then I continue to pour the beer into the bucket. One thing I forgot is I also need to test the original average alcohol by volume and the original gravity. So I've got my hydrometer and the test tube area here. So I'm going to fill that up, and then I'm going to test it. Okay, I'm going to put that off to the side. And spill it all over the place. Great. Okay. Now, just finished filling the bucket. Okay, so everything has been put into the fermentation bucket. I've got the airlock on. You can see approximately where the water is on that airlock. The other thing I want to note here is, just to save yourself a lot of trouble, take a look at how the handle is located relative to the airlock. Always put your airlock 90 degrees from or perpendicular to your handle, and always try to put it so that it's well, if you do it this way it's not so bad, but if you put it opposite to the way the handle is swinging, you're never going to have a problem with it interfering and not being able to lift your bucket. So if you put it like this in this type of an orientation, your life becomes easier. Ask me how I know. Okay, so we're going to store this fermentation bucket in a closet in my house. It should be a relatively cool, dark place. Anything below like 78 is not a bad idea with this style of beer. Okay, final thing, we'll take a look at the original gravity on the hopefully we can get a good look at this and get some focus here if I can hold it. So by volume, let's see, can I focus in on that? Or, yeah, okay, so my initial, let's see, that's by volume, so that's 5, that's 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Okay, so each major line is a percentage, so it's above 6%. Looks to be, and each one of those is 2/10. So there's 6.2, 6.4. So 6.4% original or alcohol by volume. So that's the maximum this can be, which is not bad. and which is about where it should be. And then let's take a look at what the original gravity is here. So 1.000. So it's 1.04, 1.050, 1.050. Okay. Maybe a little, yeah, 1.050. Okay, so 6.4% starting alcohol content. That's the best it can get. And 1.050 for the original gravity.